Welcome to Folk It, episode 21. 21. Huh, getting up there, huh? Season 2. And let's see, season 2, what are we working on? We are working on influence online and AI, how intersection, there's this weird stuff that happens from multiple dimensions where we've got the generative AI, hype bubble machine plowing forward, wrecking our online information system. And we have these social media companies that we've looked at for the last 10 years allowing influence campaigns to take place, marketing, propaganda, whatever you call it, influencing our brains. And along the way, a lot of people, especially social media companies, they've said, nah, you're making this stuff up. It doesn't affect us. It's what people have always been, blah, 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 blah. Social media companies, nobody's buying it. So today, I don't want to talk too long. Sometimes I go forever, but I want to touch on a paper. And this paper was interesting. There were some news stories that came out. I'll put a link or two in the description on the YouTube page to the paper and to an article about it, discussing it. And then I want to go in part two of the conversation after we review the paper. We're going to think a little bit about running our own influence campaign. Like, how can we apply what we just learned from this paper in a way that, we try to influence a positive way? Maybe it's positive to me, but it's positive to me. So we're going to go with, how do I use it? How does Folkit use this to move the needle? And with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. We're gonna talk a little bit about this paper first. Let me pull up the exact title. It's on Science, and let's see. Re-ranking partisan animosity in algorithmic social media feeds affects or alters effective polarization. It's a long title, very descriptive, however. So the gist of it is, this group of researchers, they came up with a way. It's relatively novel. They claim it's kind of a new way to do a study on how much polarized content is affecting people in a social media's feed. And reminder, like, social medias have feeds, and we've talked about this on some of the other podcasts recently. There can be a timeline, like, hey, here's a strict time ordering stuff of your followers or things you're interested in, or it can be algorithmic or mixed up in between. You could use combinations of these things to get a timeline. And in this case, what they're saying is, usually you have to get a social media to help you out if you're going to study this. Like, you would need Facebook or InstaFace or TikTok or whatever. X is what they used in this study. You would need them to agree to let you change how they share content. So instead, what they did was they built a browser plugin and they looked for volunteers. I think they got 1,250 something volunteers. They paid them $20 each at the end of completion of the study, and they wrote the plugin in the browser to reorder content. So some people saw the messages on their feed in a different order than others. There was a control group, of course, for what they did, and they said, well, what are they going after this time? So let me pull this up so I get this right, because there was a specific definition that they used for the content that was pulling from some previous research. They called it anti-democratic attitudes and partisan animosity. They reference this in the paper where they get this from. But essentially, it's what it says it is. It's content that's political, that's anti-democratic, or there's highly partisan animosity kind of involved. Well, how do you, if you have a browser and you customize the browser with a plugin and you say, hey, everybody in my study guide has to use this plugin, you need to pick out this anti-democratic attitudes. They called it AAPA, partisan animosity content. You need to find it and then change the order. So to find it, they used an LLM, a large language model, one of these Gen AI tools to do classification, text-based classification. And only pause right there because we're getting confused. There's a lot of details. I'm not ranting this time. I'm trying to break down the content. Like last time I ranted, I knocked some stuff over. Some people thought it was funny, but this time taking a different approach. We're gonna folk it, but we're gonna methodically go through the papers, the highlights, in not a rant style fashion. So here's what we've got: 1,250 people in the study. They've decided they're going to use X. So in X's normal feed that comes out on your web page, on your web browser, if you're using the web browser, they didn't let you use the phone. So you're using the web browser to read X. And now their plugin is going to look for this AAPA, this polarized political kind of content. And then they're either going to show it to you higher up than you normally would have seen it, or lower than you would have normally seen it. And to find that content, to know what to move up or down, they use an LLM. That's okay. I've seen classifiers, text-based classifiers. They call these things classifiers because you're classifying the text. Is this text the kind of text I'm looking for? Yes or no? That's what the output of the classifier usually is. Although, just to get into a little more detail, the classification output is really like a number, like 0.52. And then it's up to a judge in the training and the evaluation part of building a classifier to pick a threshold. So the output of that classifier might be 0.53. And if so, if it's above 0.5, you say it's a yes. And if it's below 0.5, you say it's a no. So this doesn't really matter too much. I'm just bringing it up because there's a lot of work that goes into building that text-based classifier. LLMs can do it. There are other algorithms. You can use something like a random forest to build a text-based classifier, along with other people call these machine learning methods, but they're statistical methods that are looking at classifying text. It's been done a million times. It's been done a million times on Twitter. My hunch is that in order to get papers funded, what happens is you have to say you're using an LLM. You have to say you're using Gen AI. So why not? Why not use this LLM? It works. So that's what they did. Perfectly okay with this use of generative AI tech and the LLM in this case. They could have used something else, but well, it's all right. No problem. They had to get funded. All right. So now this paper is saying, hey, when you log into Twitter, we're going to look for this anti-democratic attitude, polarized political content. And if we find it, we'll move it up or down. So some people got moved into the up group. Some people got moved into the down group. So they, would see it lower in their feed and have to scroll more. And others were control. And I think they had a control for both. Although I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to look that up. Don't quote me on that. But it was well done study. Like it looked like they had gotten valid conclusions. All right. So what were these valid conclusions? One, what do you expect? Like if you move up this polarized content higher in people's feeds, you expect intuitively, if you've been on the internet long enough, you've been studying this thing, like I said, it's been going on 10 years where we know it's happening. It's just hard to prove. And social media companies haven't wanted to work with researchers to prove it. So in this case, what you would expect is if you see it higher and you see it more and your brain is getting inundated earlier in your feed with this polarized content, you would be more sympathetic to that point of view. You've seen it, it's higher up, it occurs earlier. It's in our Brain is a Jungle, episode 1, season 1. Brain is a Jungle, we're wearing that path. We see it first. we expect the people who are getting it higher up in the feed are going to one see it sooner, see it more often because, like you log in, you might not scroll that far down the page that day. So you'll see more of it and you see it early and often. You will be more sympathetic to that polarized content, those anti-democratic posts. And that's what they found. So it was a significant difference in their study between the control group and the ones who got it higher in the feed. Flipping that around, you move it lower in the feed. You see it less often and it comes later. The other things you were thinking about earlier got your attention first. You would expect that it lower in the feed, your attitudes would actually shift the other direction, right? You're less sympathetic. That content affects you less. You believe it less because your feelings about this are different after seeing it lower in the feed. And that's exactly what they found. Another statistical difference here. So just recapping, stepping back again, right? We're thinking about this paper. The authors say this is a new method where they develop a way to alter the feed right in somebody's browser for participants that would see content in a different order. They pick out this content they think is affecting people. It's emotional. They try moving it up for some. They try moving it down lower in the feed for others. They find what they expect to find, which is the feelings about that content change depending on the order in the direction of if you see it more frequently, you're more sympathetic to that opinion. And if you see it less frequently, you're less sympathetic. They get the results by a survey after, after people are kind of doing the content feed and going through X every day for a while, they get a survey result on this and then find the attitudes. Not earth-shattering, but super, super helpful to be able to do it without a social media platform and to find what is often challenged in the very first sentence when you bring, the power of social media up to people. Immediately people will, pshaw, that doesn't mean nothing. That's online, blah, 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 blah. That means nothing. I had this opinion the whole time myself. You're challenging me even though I had this opinion. You're saying no, it works. Influence campaigns online work. They change attitudes and beliefs. And this took like 3 weeks. So even more than working, that was sort of what surprised me was in a short amount of time, you can affect people's beliefs significantly. I think it shifted 2 to 2.5 points on a 0 to 100 scale. Like, here's how do I feel about this? Hot, cold, and 0, cold, 100, hot. Like the attitudes that shifted 2 plus 2.5 degrees in only a few weeks. Imagine if you're running these things for years. And that's what's been going on. Like I said, we've known about this for a decade, and the people who are good at it have been improving their tradecraft for that whole time. So we're all going online in this war where experts have improved their tradecraft in a way that helps them influence you on topics that are divisive, polarized, and you can't help it. You don't get to choose the order of the feed. Like in very few cases are customization tools. You're at the mercy of X. And as we talked about this last time, get off of X. The new ownership owns the algorithm. They have a serious agenda that's political. Get off. They own the order you see the stuff. It's a toxic waste dump. They're not doing trust and safety. They're not filtering content to make a nice productive discussion. They're filtering content in a way that helps them. The ownership, the algorithm, it's not a public interest website. You can just leave it. You can just leave it. Why swim in toxic waste? That's ridiculous. If you take anything away from Folkit at all, Folkit, leave. Folkit, leave. Forget this mess. So, all right. Well done paper. I'm going to put it in, like I said, the YouTube description, maybe the comments with one of the stories. You can go check it out, read it for yourself, scan it. I found it interesting. It confirmed a bias that I already had. So by all means, kind of read through it yourself, kind of apply your own critical lens. Um, but it, I think it was a good one. And the surprising part to me was how little effort it really took to sway these opinions on this type of content, which is what we see every day all over the internet, on every site. We're all swimming in it. We talked about the extreme points of view. The extreme points of view can exist on both sides. You can run into this anywhere. So now I'm going to shift because, like I said, we don't want to spend too much time on it. It's a great paper. Some good stories came out. A lot of good commentary on it. And I'm going to give credit to Pivot to AI. I'll link their podcast too. Um, saw a post on one of the social feeds I'm on from Pivot to AI's podcast, and they're also very much against the generative AI push, like myself, and understanding this influence work as well. So the question that came back to me, which I thought was a very good question in this interaction we had, was, well, what can you do about it? In so many words, you know, if the social media platforms are facilitating, these discussions without content filtering, that's just what's going on. And if the generative AI companies are pushing generative AI tools into schools and workplaces, which is exactly what's going on, massive push for adoption. So much money's on the line. There is this push, and the push is in social media. And we just talked about the paper proving if you push that content to the top, it affects you. So if you're a social media company like X and Meta are both involved in building LLMs themselves, they're both heavily invested in this generative AI working and pushing to have adopted in their workplaces as well as schools. What do we do? Like, there isn't a good method. So in this case, the discussion was about lawyers. And so the workplace that we were talking about was lawyers were, because of this push, thinking about, well, what happens when AI takes over for a judge? That's highly speculative, first of all, because AI is not going to take over for anything. AI, we've talked about a million times, these generative AIs, LLMs, are predictive text, and not intelligent. It doesn't reason no matter what anybody claims, any press release you say. There's no reasoning happening there. It's predictive text. So when we're talking about something like a judge being replaced by an AI. And then legal organizations, organizations of lawyers are thinking, oh, okay, let's spend time discussing what do we do when that happens. They're jumping multiple steps ahead, right? And they're jumping multiple steps ahead because they've been influenced. This is my hypothesis now. We're going into more speculation. People want to think ahead, right? Because a lot of times when you're an executive, that's what you're paid to do. You're paid to understand the technical landscape, the technology landscape, what's out there, what's coming your way. So if you're in senior positions in legal, committees, organizations, professional practice, you're part of your job is to understand it and think ahead. But you only would think ahead that a judge could be replaced by AI if you thought it was worth your time. And to be worth your time, there has to be some plausible path forward to a reasoning smart AI. So the assumption in this whole kind of train of thought for judges replacing, people, while AI is replacing judge as a, person, is there is a plausible path to this AGI, this super AI that's out there. And there isn't. It doesn't exist. There's no mechanism to get there that's been logically explained. So this whole, train of thought that was going on was premature, a waste of time. But let me ask you this. If you wanted to gain adoption, you could push inside of these legal professions, the places online that they hang out, the newspapers that they read, try to influence these influencers. And by that, I mean, make your content, which is pro AI, pro AGI, pro super intelligence, make it seem like to those people that it's close, right? You're publishing an article, and I'm sure we've all seen these articles now where people are publishing, oh, it's close, it's close. 1 year from now is Elon Musk and Sam Altman. Their favorite thing to say is, a year from now, we will have self-driving cars. A year from now, we will have no developers. A year from now, we will not have radiologists. A year from now, we're going to have genetically engineered, medicine that's going to cure cancer. And it never comes. You just promise a year from now, every year, infinity times. But those articles, if you place them prominently, going back to our research paper we just talked about, if you place them prominently in the right person's feed, their social feeds, their offline feeds with like people they talk to, or print media that they get, or television that they see, you bump this idea up to their head and they start to believe it. And it can happen in a matter of weeks. Definitely can happen in a matter of months. And since this AI hype train has been going on for years now, years, of course they've made inroads. And my hypothesis is this has been happening at the top down. So it's not just legal senior executives. It's Fortune 500 senior executives. It's journalist and media senior executives. It's defense industry senior executives. It is U.S. government healthcare senior executives. It is the senior executives across the board have been flooded with bad information about AGI. And it's been a well-funded campaign, of course, because it costs a gajillion dollars to build a data center and power it. But it doesn't cost a gajillion dollars to get on X with some fake accounts and start promoting your stuff. Doesn't take a gajillion dollars to start a Substack or pay somebody who's already got a Substack. Buy them a few extra, subscriptions, leave a few extra comments there about AGI, take them out to lunch. There's some well-known people that were influencers. You just take them out to lunch. Tell them all about how close AGI is and how these amazing demos you've seen are right around the corner. A year from now, it's all going to be different. Influence the influencers. And that's what we've seen. That's what I think. In generative AI spaces, we have seen well-funded influence campaigns that are happening online for sure. I'm guessing offline many times as well here, where you tell the influencers it's right around the corner. Scare them, excite them, tempt them with greed, tell them they're an insider, they're going to know early, they need to pivot their organization to this. And then they push down the stack. So engineers, worker bees like me and you, we get pushed down from the top telling us use it or else. And that's where we are. So, the next podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit more about, well, how do you fight back? Well, I say you fight back the same way. I say you influence the influencers with a different point of view. You effectively create your own content that pushes their super optimistic view of AGI down. You find out who you can talk to online and different spaces. Let's say I just pick, I like the Dallas Mavericks. I like watching them play. Mark Cuban's online. Sit in Mark Cuban's comments. He's on multiple social media platforms. Sit in his comments with half a dozen accounts. Get your friends, make some alts yourself, and look authoritative. Make your accounts look like they've got PhDs. Make them look like you've worked in trust and safety at social media. Make them look like, you're a data scientist. And then sit in his comments and upvote all the ones that agree with you. AGI is not going to happen anytime soon. Downvote all the rest. Push your comments so that when Mark Cuban says something and it is any way remotely related to AI, boom, you get in there first. You get in there first, like first comment. He's just posted 30 seconds ago. Oh, look, I'm scrolling Mark Cuban's account with one of these troll farms. Boom, boom, boom. I'm in there first. Mark, AGI is not going to happen, man. You do that long enough, you move your content up long enough, Mark will fall. Now, next time we'll talk about it like a little more strategic level. Like, how do we go just beyond Mark? All right. Mark's a nice guy. I like this whole Dallas Mavericks ownership, watching him play the games. I don't know about his personal views. I'm just using his as an example here of someone who is online and understands AI. Like, I've seen him with some really bad takes about AI. But he's an example. We're going to talk about strategically on the next podcast doing the steps that we would want to go through to expand it out, to make it more than just an example of, a person like Mark. We're not really going to do this, of course. We're not really going to run this influence campaign online. We're just going to talk about it. So that way it helps you recognize it when everybody else is doing it too. You run into it all the time. Last podcast, we were talking about the troll farms that were not in America, but dressed up as MAGA. That's everywhere. These influence campaigns are all over. We're every time we log in, we're in this war zone. AI and AGI has embraced it. The AI community embraced running war zone campaigns online to influence the AI industry. And we're just gonna talk about how to counter it a little bit. That's all. Like, strategically, what can we do? What's it gonna take? How much money? What do we need? Can we get a groundswell of volunteers? Maybe, maybe. Stay tuned next week.